Hello, and welcome to Fostering Connections with the Natural World, a Biophilic Cities webinar series. I'm Amanda Beck, a research associate with the Biophilic Cities project at the University of Virginia. Through this series, we'll hear from practitioners and researchers who are creating healthier communities, healthier landscapes, and healthier people through increased connections with nature. The Biophilic Cities project started at UVA in 2011 to explore and advance nature in cities. In the fall of 2013, the Global Biophilic Cities Network was launched, with partner cities spanning the globe from San Francisco, California, Wellington, New Zealand, and Singapore. This series is one way the Biophilic Cities Project aims to help share knowledge about the innovative work of cities, organizations, and individuals around the world who are championing biophilic design. To see the schedule of our past topics and to register for our last upcoming webinar, please visit our website at www.biophiliccity.org/registration. Today we will hear from Marcia Caton Campbell, Executive Director of the Center for Resilient Cities in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The CRC is a nonprofit that practices sustainable community development, working with neighbors to build communities that are good for people and the environment. Caton Campbell also serves on Mayor Tom Barrett's Green Team, a group of sustainability stakeholders responsible for implementing the city's sustainable plan, Refresh Milwaukee. Previously, she was a faculty member of the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Department of Urban and Regional Planning, where her teaching and research focused on community-based planning and community food systems planning. Caton Campbell will speak for 30 minutes to be followed by questions from the audience. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Marcia.
It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today, and I hope everyone can hear me all right. I'm going to be talking for the next 30 minutes about our work and its context and emphasis on equitable access to urban nature in two cities where my organization works, Madison and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A little outline of the presentation, a brief tour of our history, and then a longer discussion of our three primary projects, all of which we maintain some involvement in, two of which are still underway or nearing completion. So a little bit about our history. We were founded in 1996 in Madison, Wisconsin as an urban land trust. And a concern about inequity in quality open space has guided where we work ever since. We maintain our urban land trust status, and to this day, but we have morphed over time and evolved from promoting access to high quality urban green space and creating the same where it doesn't exist, to taking on a more explicit environmental justice and social determinants of health kind of aspect to our work when we moved to Milwaukee to do the Johnson's Park initiative. And then most recently our work has shifted to incorporate biophilic design and aspects of resilience. We renamed ourselves the Center for Resilient Cities in 2006 after writing an internal white paper on the subject. And we've essentially been working in these areas ever since, the areas that you see on our evolution slide here. In the course of our now almost 20-year history, we have shifted from talking about sustainability to talking about resilience. We feel that resilience is a more lively term, and it captures the social and economic aspects of the work that we try to do, as well as the environmental aspects, and that it does so with a thrivability mindset, as the quote on the screen indicates, and that's just better for our work overall. We come at things from a systems perspective and are increasingly using a social ecological systems approach to what we're doing, of the type that is described in Marianne Krasny and Keith Tidball's new book, Civic Ecology. So that's sort of where we're headed now in the work that we're doing. And we have developed a set of guiding principles that also represent common themes across our work. There are 10 of them. They are hard-won. We developed them through trial and error. They're listed here not necessarily in linear fashion, as the PowerPoint listing might suggest, but the first principle, invitation, and the last principle, community ownership, are in the right places, and the others are expressed cyclically and repeatedly as we go through our work, and as we move from that initial invitation from community through collaboration, capacity building, through modularity in our project work, biological landscape, economic and social diversity in the work that we do, innovation, and adaptive learning in particular from the communities in which we work, and then restoring people and places, learning again from our projects, our programs, and the people we interact with on a regular basis. We do, in our projects, all involve layers of overlapping governance. We help to bridge the gaps that sometimes exist between community and units of local government. We're also boundary spanners when it comes to the nature of the work that we do. So we really try not to be siloed, but to work in collaborative partnerships that cut across many sectors. And then finally, community ownership is always the ultimate aim. We like to think of ourselves as Monica White, a professor of environmental justice at UW-Madison, says, as stepping up to step back. We'll see how that goes with our final project, which is a much more ambitious thing, and you'll see that when we get there. So to talk about our projects a little bit, which really bridge multiple spaces, and by multiple spaces I mean physical space, social space, political space, intergovernmental space, and also physical landscape space. The evidence base is now pretty substantial that particularly in urban settings, people's ability to access natural environments has a bearing on their health, and that there is a pretty serious lack of equity in such access, particularly in aging industrial cities like Milwaukee. Madison is a little bit different, but because it's not an aging industrial city, it is the center of state government and an education center, and makes everybody's top 10 lists for high quality living environments, high quality of life, and opportunity. However, in October of 2013, a report was released called Race to Equity by the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families. It was funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and it reveals that for African Americans in Dane County, where Madison is situated, the disparities and inequities are as great between the African American population and the Euro-Caucasian population as they are anywhere else in the state of Wisconsin, and the report claims anywhere else in the United States. So I think what we see in our work is that the issues faced by people of color, and particularly African Americans, are the same whether they live in Madison or they live in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, the magnitude is a little bit different because of sheer population numbers, but the impact on the individual is arguably as severe. So we will start with a discussion of our first project in Madison, which is known as Troy Gardens, in which a new nature-based development pattern, and by that I mean literally a development pattern and a zoning category for the city of Madison resulted. This is a well-documented story of community-based land-saving action involving 17 neighborhood associations, 6 nonprofits, including a land trust, us, and a community land trust, the UW-Madison, and then 31 acres of vacant state-owned land that was part of the mental health physical complex on the north side of Madison. So this is work we cut our teeth on. As one of many partners at the table, we had an explicit natural areas conservation, restoration, and management role. So this is a community-designed project, and the community formally excused the city staff from the process and engaged them later on when they needed some funds to help purchase the land. So I won't go into the details of that story, but I will show you first of all, here's Madison. This is a view of Monona Terrace designed by Frank Lloyd Wright on the lower right, and you are looking at Madison's downtown from Lake Monona, and in the background is Lake Mendota. Madison has 4 lakes in the city. So this is, if you look at this, you think, wow, what an environment. There's a bike path along the lakefront. There's all kinds of water, all kinds of nature. You can see woods in the background. Lots and lots of opportunity for the kind of engagement and the kind of interaction with biophilia that we all know is so critical. The Troy Gardens neighborhood is located on the north side of Lake Mendota, where I have just kind of scribbled in orange there in the lower right. The vantage point that you were looking at was right here on the City of Madison map. And the Troy Gardens parcel itself is this 31 acres right here along a railroad line next to a neighborhood that has predominantly got public housing in it. Here are some wealthier neighborhoods leading up to the lakefront property, and then off to the left of the screen is the Central Wisconsin Center, which is for severely developmentally disabled adults. So this is the parcel of land in question. Here's what it looks like now, post-development, with housing on the right and urban agriculture on the left, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. This is the aerial view of the site. Pre-development, right around 2000, when only the community gardens existed and they were on the part of the site where the housing is now. So an abandoned rail bed here, and essentially a lot of vacant land where the community walked their dogs, did bird watching, and this parcel served about 17 neighborhoods as essentially a park. So the land was threatened. It was declared surplus by the state and was put up for sale, and the proposals were for 100 houses in a standard subdivision format. And the community rose up and said, no, 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 that's not what we want. So here's the concept rendering of what was ultimately built, and you can see the housing in the lower right, the community gardens in the lower left. There is a CSA farm in the upper right, and then a restored prairie in the upper left of the slide. So over 320 garden plots on 5 acres, 30 green-built housing units, 10 of which are market rate, 20 of which are permanently affordable on 5 acres, the 4-acre CSA farm, which serves over 120 families, And then this restored prairie area and natural areas and woodland, sort of transecting the site and essentially enveloping the site. So pathways that create a sense of prospect, opportunities to grow together both as people and through community gardening and youth gardening programs. Here's a look across the community gardens. The gardeners are African American, Hmong, Khmer, Laotian, Latino, and Euro-Caucasian. It's really a substantially blended community of people. There's hands-on engagement with the natural world for all ages and all abilities. Youth gardening and education programs have led to the construction of a living stage where performances are given, some of which are music, some of which are theater and spoken word. An earth oven was built, and bread and pizza are baked on site. In the upper portion of the site, there is the prairie, the restored prairie and natural areas, which are volunteer managed and offer a lot of opportunity for engagement. Here you see grasses that are 4 feet high and in some instances higher. There is an apartment complex off in the distance. But again, here you get that sense of prospect and slight sense of risk. What's around the bend? Because you really cannot see it. But it's this space. So here's a sense of refuge provided. This is a Jens Jensen-inspired council ring made of native Avoca Highland sandstone that was trucked in 32 tons or something like that of sandstone, brought in, and a natural seating area that is below grade. And when you are sitting in it and the prairie grasses are high, you can hear people, but you can't see them. They can hear you, but they can't see you. So it's an interesting gathering place. And weddings have been performed here, and Boy Scout groups have camped overnight and that kind of thing in this space. Right next door to that is the organic farm that serves over 120 families, as I mentioned. It's a CSA farm, and there are worker shares as well as purchased shares. So people have lots of opportunity to engage. This was in the early days of the farm when the soil quality wasn't as good as it is now, but it has greatly improved since. And then you cross an old railroad bed that has been capped, abandoned and capped to create a trail through the site. And what you see here is the pathway from the farm to the housing. And this is the pathway through the housing. Again, 30 units of housing. It's attached. I worked on this project for a decade, and at one time I knew which units were market rate and which units were affordable housing, and I can't tell the difference anymore. I'd have to get an old plan out and take a look. It's a beautiful area. Lots of children live here, people of all ages, people with different physical abilities. It's a glorious place to live. You have a 26-acre backyard, and you share it with lots and lots of people. And the community here is very gracious about people wandering through what is essentially their front yard in the courtyard between the houses. This is a public space. It is park-like in the main. It is owned by the Madison Area Community Land Trust, and my organization holds a conservation easement on the 26 acres of open space. It's a feast for the senses. It's a healing space for many, especially for the Hmong immigrant population. And there's lots of opportunity for active recreation in the form of gardening and more passive recreation in the form of gentle strolls and bird watching. There's food production, and all of this takes place inside city limits. So really a remarkable nature-based development pattern. And as I say, this was the project on which we cut our teeth. It began in 1996. It is ongoing. A group called Community Groundworks at Troy Gardens now manages the open space. It's just a wonderful place. So if you ever find yourself on the north side of Madison, Wisconsin, you should feel free to take a walk. So as this project was reaching completion and we were moving into our sort of quiet role of maintaining the conservation easement, holding and maintaining the conservation easement, we began to work in the city of Milwaukee on a project that had its origins in an environmental justice issue and essentially embodies what we believe is restorative environmental design. So to give you an orientation, this is Milwaukee's lakefront, part of it anyway, a view from the 40th floor of the tallest building in Milwaukee, which is only 44 stories high. There are 3 rivers, abundant tree-lined trails, lots of opportunities for bicycling and water recreation, boating, paddle boating on the lagoon here, and then that's Lake Michigan in the background. So if you live on the east side of the city, you're living in an area that is rich with natural features and opportunities to engage with nature. However, if you live in other parts of Milwaukee, things are different. And the subject of our conversation about Milwaukee here is this area indicated by number 2, which is the Park West Freeway area. So you were looking at downtown from this vantage point, and we're going to be talking about an area that's 10 minutes away from the lakefront, but could not be more different. This is the Johnson's Park area of the city, a neighborhood called Lindsay Heights, and the view that you're looking at, the aerial view there, is of Johnson's Park. So this was a classic urban renewal highway project, destroyed about 12,000 residential properties in the heart of the African American community for the purposes of a commuter freeway that was never built. And what resulted was classic scenes of urban neighborhood decay. And as the economic climate changed in Milwaukee from a manufacturing industry and people in this area of the city lost jobs, it was the classic pattern of disinvestment and decline. So this is a schoolyard that you're looking at. Here is what used to be a grocery store and a parking lot. That grocery store has since been demolished. And then here is part of a small park. This is the neighborhood pre-demolition in 1956. The area that we'll be talking about more is right here and right here. So you can see it's a really dense neighborhood with some tree canopy, no park that you can see, when demolition was done, it was essentially a wholesale clearing of the area, and homes were knocked into their foundations. Streets were not removed necessarily initially, but what you're looking at now is our project area with Brown Street School as one of the few buildings left on the site. And Johnson's Park and surroundings were built in the early 1980s. This is the project area, and you can see the swath that the freeway cut through the neighborhood. And a lot of that land is vacant to this day. So the city of Milwaukee did a really good plan for the Fond du Lac and North Avenue strategic planning area, one of 13 for the city of Milwaukee. We came along in 2005 and had done a second study because the city's plan did not include any green infrastructure, no urban ag, no parks, no nothing. So we did an analysis of all of that, and we're invited by a park advocacy group and by the NAACP to lead a community vision and design process because there was a perceived inequity in access to green space and urban parks in Central City, Milwaukee. And just as a sidebar comment, most of the parks in the city of Milwaukee, including the 2 designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, are county-owned, not city-owned. So what you're looking at here is the project that we ultimately undertook. This is the entire project area that I was showing you before. Brown Street Academy School, Alice's Garden, which is 2 acres, and the 11.5 acre Johnson's Park. So this is 19 contiguous acres, but it is spanning multiple spaces, multiple ownership, city, school district, county. And we wound up designing, in conjunction with the community, different sensory and learning experiences for engaging the natural world. So to go a little more quickly through things, this is Alice's Garden at the time that we got engaged. It was being managed by Extension, but really, still had old alleys and streets running through it that the city had forgotten to vacate. This is an aerial of the site as we were in the process of renovating it. There is a labyrinth down here, a yoga lawn right here, a pavilion and gathering space, over 100 garden beds, and tool sheds and so on for people to store things in. This is what Bill Browning earlier in this series from Terrapin Bright Green describes as nature in the space. This is a community-inspired design for a space that is healing land, body, mind, and spirit, and is now community-run. And here are some images of Alice's Garden. This is a neighborhood that many African Americans migrated north to in search of manufacturing employment. And so a lot of the programming in the garden has to do with the African diaspora, first from Africa to the Deep South as slaves, and then farther north in search of employment. This white picket fence that you see here represents a master's garden, and over in the distance is a slave garden. The garden programming tells the story of that diaspora and African Americans' contributions to agriculture. There's a story circle made out of stumps carved by a city forest worker on his lunch hour. In the lower photo, here's the yoga lawn with the labyrinth in the background. Really a striking place. You're just looking at the south half of the garden in these images. Here's the day that we dedicated the garden with libations poured by an African American man who had grown up in a house that once stood in what is now the southwest corner of the garden. And then here is the labyrinth after planting. This was a community-designed project that we helped execute. And here's a combination of sensory stimuli that lead to healing, I think, in a big way. These are herb plants, and once they grew for a season, they were up to your knees. So visual, olfactory, auditory, haptic, gustatory, movement through space, temperature change as you enter various garden spaces, and all of this experienced with also some guided meditations that reflect on the history of the neighborhood and the demolition of the houses and so on. We went on then to move to the Brown Street Academy site immediately south of that, and again, nature in the space, nature of the space being designed. This is one of the oldest school buildings in the MPS physical plant, so it has high ceilings, large windows that open, and wood floors. This is a view of the schoolyard on the left before we worked on it. Here is the north schoolyard. The only evidence of biophilia is the weeds growing through the asphalt. A UW-Madison landscape architecture class worked with children at the school who drew pictures of deserts, volcanic eruptions, and fire-breathing dragons to show how hot this playground was, and then drew snow-capped mountains, flowers, and trees for what they wanted to see. So this is an aerial view of what the site looked like when we began to work with the school, and this is the plan that resulted and was implemented in 3 phases. This is a school where 98% of the children participate in free and reduced lunch, which is an indicator of poverty, and these kids did not have a lot of access to the natural world. So here is construction of the north schoolyard outdoor classroom, dramatically changing that space. The green lawn in the center was really important to the kids. They didn't have safe yards to play in, and many of them had never simply lain on a grassy surface and looked at the sky. So there are opportunities for art, music, and theater here, structures to garden in. So the teacher treats this space, the principal, I'm sorry, treats this space as literally an outdoor classroom. The school is guided by Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and that really influences how they use this space. So we went on to do construction of the North Schoolyard, creating places for active play and also for some quiet opportunities. Here are the kids at play. Here's the city's Arbor Day celebration at which the kids performed in 2013. Then we went on to complete the South Schoolyard, which is for very young children, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, and kids with special needs. So here's the after. Here are the kids playing on steel whale drums outside. And then something that surprised us a little bit, we designed a curved border to bound the areas of the South Schoolyard with a hard edge, but it immediately became an urban trail for the small kids. So we're working on Johnson's Park right now. It is a very broad expanse. Off to the left, you see a slight rise. That was a 14-foot high berm that obscured clear sightlines into the park. This is the park after berm removal with Alice's Garden in the lower right, Brown Street Academy above it. So early on in the project, we removed enough berm material as if we had excavated an entire football field, end zone to end zone, to a depth of 5 feet. There was a really strong community desire for this for safety reasons. Here are the kids sitting atop the 14-foot high berm before their sledding hill was taken away. Old park shelter being demolished. And what's going to result is a much more manicured space, but this is addressing an environmental justice issue. The community was very clear. We want a park like wealthy neighborhoods have. We're going to be breaking ground on this aspect of the project next month, and we'll have it completed by September. So there are sports fields, there is a bioswale to help control rainwater, standard playground equipment that's already been installed. And then I know that I'm at 30 minutes, but I'm going to take 5 more, and we're going to take a quick look back at Madison. So before we spoke of Troy Gardens, which is on Madison's north side, now we're going to be looking at our Badger Rock Center project, which is on Madison's south side. And the Badger Rock Center was an old Badger school building. We bought the site, we engaged the community in a design and planning process. This is a community of 5 neighborhoods that is severely economically distressed, as designated by HUD, and geographically isolated from the rest of Madison. This is about a 3-minute drive from the initial slide that I showed you of downtown Madison, but it takes 45 minutes to get there by bus. And our Badger Rock Neighborhood Center director, Cora White, who's lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, describes this area of the city as a forgotten community. So we recruited a public charter middle school as a partner. This is a middle school of 100 kids. They're focused on project-based learning, on sustainability and urban agriculture and the STEM fields. And we also recruited Growing Power, the internationally known urban agriculture organization headed by Will Allen, as partners, and we hired neighbors as neighborhood center staff. Phase 1 of the project, which you see here in white, has been built. Growing Power is growing quite a lot of vegetables in garden beds and in one of the hoop houses that eventually there will be 4. The students grow in garden beds that they have access to. We will eventually build community gardens and much more on this site. Phase 1 is 23,000 square feet on a 3.85 acre site. We built the building to LEED Platinum standards, which means everything from solar panels on the roof to daylighting wherever possible to stormwater management both through a stairwell cistern that holds 7,000 gallons, and that's this stairwell cistern here, to 2 underground cisterns. I'll show you one of those a little later on. So here's the building immediately after it opened. The second story is the school. The first story is the multi-purpose room and cafeteria. Lots of meeting space, lots of activity there. Here's Growing Powers Gardens again with the stairwell cistern in the background. This is a space where we have nature in the space, nature of the space, and lots of natural analogs. You're looking at 2 wood panels that from wood harvested on site, stone that is from the region in the stone walls, and then recycled vinyl flooring with lots of native, nature patterns in them. Here's the roof with the solar panels, 2 of the 3 arrays arranged differently. The cistern that drains into the stairwell tower, again, holds 7,000 gallons. This is one of the 2 30,000 gallon underground cisterns going in. The water from these goes through UV filters and then is used to water all the urban agriculture on site. Here's a view of the building from the southwest, showing some of the bioinfiltration ponds and the greenhouse where Growing Power grows things year-round and is building out aquaponics systems. Everything that isn't a natural area is edible. So here's the first apple blossom and first apple. Kids were growing on site as the building was being constructed, and they continue to do that. And they help build new garden beds, offering lots of opportunity for interaction with natural systems. The beds are laid out not in the standard agricultural orientation, but on the diagonal for stormwater management purposes. The puddle you see on the right will eventually be a cranberry bog that has not yet been built. And then just back to the site plan very quickly, this phase 2 area will be an additional 33,000 square feet, holding lots of space for the neighborhood center, a gymnasium, and an expansion of the school property to allow the school to go up to its full 150 student capacity. So this work is moving from biophilic design to civic ecology as the neighborhood center programming begins to translate the building and grounds to the neighborhood and to community groups, and as more and more community members become engaged with the activities on site. Here's a rendering of the phase 2. And just to sort of conclude very quickly and move into the question part of this presentation, it's very clear that ecosystem services, environmental justice, and access to urban green space are overlapping issues. All of that feeds into what Krasny and Tidball call civic ecology. The Harvard Center on Health and the Global Environment recently issued a report following a long an intensive workshop on the subject, and there's contributing to the evidence base that shows that these things are critical to human health and to community health, and that every single one of these things, ecosystem services, environmental justice, access to green space, access to biophilia, biophilic design, all are equity issues that we need to address. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. About the community planning processes on these projects, did the CRC use charrettes or something else to bring people in on the design process? And then how long did the community involvement take overall for the projects? And could you talk maybe a little bit about some of the challenges?
Sure. In the case of Troy Gardens, community involvement was done through convening by the Neighborhood Planning Council that organized the 17 neighborhood associations. The planning process lasted 6 years before construction began, and in many ways community engagement there is constant because of the number of people on site on a regular basis and the number of different groups responsible for managing it. With respect to Milwaukee, we convened a large number of stakeholders, everyone we could find essentially, neighborhood groups, neighborhood associations, community organizations working in the neighborhood, funders, representatives from the school, and we conducted an 18-month planning and design process that had several different charrettes embedded in it, and then resulted in a big reveal of 3 different plans, and the community flagged the things they liked about the different plans, and then those were consolidated and put into one. These projects take a long time for us to pull off because we also do a lot of the we have done a lot of the fundraising work and grant writing that supports them. And so in the case of the Johnson's Park Initiative, that's a $3.1 million project that has taken us 10 years from initial planning to completion this fall. So with each phase, Alice's Garden, the 3 phases of Brown Street Academy, and now Johnson's Park, we have gone back to the community repeatedly to confirm their desires or to learn of things that they would like to see changed because circumstances in the neighborhood have changed, or someone else has done some aspect of something that influences the project in one way or another. And then with respect to the Badger Rock Center, after phase 1 opened, we did some charrettes designed to gather input from the building users, because they of course immediately began to give us feedback as we were operating the building about all the things that didn't work, and then did a quick redesign within the same footprint of the space for phase 2, which includes a 1,500 square foot retail space that we hope will be a food use. This is a neighborhood that has no grocery store. There are 2 sources of food. One is a convenience store and one is the bowling alley across the street from the building, which is a great partner to us. And we had a lot of meetings at the bowling alley. So we try to address community interests and needs right up to basically the minute the shovel goes in the ground, and then after.
Wow, that takes a lot of patience and probably some very skilled grant writers on your staff then.
Yeah, and we're a small staff too. We have 4 full-time and 4 part-time staff.
Can you talk a little bit about the long-term maintenance strategies for the projects that you have designed?
Okay. The Troy Gardens project has long-term maintenance largely by community groundworks. It's mostly land maintenance. The housing is obviously owned by the individual owners who are responsible for maintaining it. We have a very limited role there in maintenance because we are now just down to holding the conservation easement. So a lot depends on volunteer efforts there, and just generally on a steady pool of interns and so on. College students and high school students who work on the farm and work in the natural areas. For the Johnson's Park Initiative, those are very formally managed spaces. We have built a $200,000 maintenance endowment into the fundraising for the park, and we are within striking distance of raising all of that money. And county parks, Milwaukee County Parks is obligated to maintain this park to the same standards of that it does its parks in more affluent neighborhoods, such as the Lake Park neighborhood. We have a development agreement with them that pertains to how the park will be developed and how it will be maintained. The local community foundation, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, will likely wind up holding those maintenance funds. We had a similar arrangement with the city school district pertaining to Brown Street Academy. Alice's Garden Community manages the garden space itself, which is owned by Milwaukee County Parks. And then with respect to Badger Rock Center, it's all on us because we own it. And facilities maintenance is challenging. Growing Power manages the exterior, the urban agricultural spaces, but we manage the rest of it.
Have you explored the potential for creating green corridors to connect these sites with other off-site green spaces?
Yes. I'll just speak specifically about Badger Rock because there aren't very many green spaces in Milwaukee surrounding this 19-acre project. That is the largest green space for something like 700 acres, 110 plus blocks. The Badger Rock Center has a city bike path. We encourage the city to put a bike path through the park that's immediately adjacent. It's a small little park, city park. We encourage them to extend the bike path there. We then paid for the bike path to be extended through our property, and it's possible to connect with the bike path that then takes you downtown. And it's about a 5 or 6 mile ride to downtown, so it can be done quite handily. And in fact, the summer camps that we offer to middle schoolers have the kids riding their bikes all over the place as they go from activity to activity. Green corridors, I think, are easier to accomplish in Madison simply because there are so many of them. The network of bike paths and trails through the city are incredibly green, and so. But this is a geographically isolated neighborhood. It's bounded by the Beltline Highway, the sewage treatment plant, something called the Nine Springs E-Way, which is a big green environmental corridor that we can easily connect to with a short bike ride. It's within walking distance, and then all the automobile dealerships are to the west of us, across the street. So it's a little tougher, but but the goal is there, the desire is there, and we'll see what happens.
I'm interested how the work of the CRC has sort of created a paradigm shift. You mentioned that some of the children had never laid on grass before, and so they were really excited to have a safe outdoor play space. And I'm wondering, have you noticed, thanks to these new experiences, are residents starting to ask for new things from their city government, such as more land conservation or better access to nature, or the conversion of hardscape to naturalscape?
This is a great question, and I'll speak about it specifically in Milwaukee because Madison is a much greener space. There's much more opportunity for green space there and existing green space there. In Milwaukee, the city's sustainability plan, which is called Refresh Milwaukee, has very explicitly a number of green infrastructure and green space goals, and in particular references schoolyard greening of the type that we did at Brown Street Academy. That project was expensive enough and expansive enough that it might not be suitable for every school setting, but there's no reason why schoolyards in Milwaukee, which in the older parts of the city look exactly like the initial slides I showed you of nothing but asphalt with a few weeds growing through the cracks. There's no reason why those can't be greened, and greened in a way that supports education and the curriculum inside the school. The reason we did such a large-scale project at Brown Street was in part because the curriculum was so well suited to it, and the school's educational philosophy was so well suited to it. And essentially a large demonstration project that is designed to inspire. So yes, there's greater demand for that. And in Milwaukee right now, there is a consortium called the Green Schools Consortium that is working on this very thing, which we are a part of.
Well, great, Marcia. Thank you so much for sharing the work of the Center for Resilient Cities. It's been really great to see the projects that you guys have been up to. We talk a lot about being more sustainable and making our cities greener, but I think you highlighted a crucial element to that equation, which is equitable access. So I'm really glad that there's people out there working to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Join us next week on Wednesday, May 6th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for our last webinar featuring author Sue Thomas.